Hello and welcome to the Swan Song Podcast. My name is Ben Buddy Slack and I'm the founder of the Swan Song Project and the host of this podcast. The Swan Song Project is a charity. We're based here in Leeds, England, and we help people who are facing the end of their lives or dealing with a bereavement to write and record an original song. We believe in celebrating lives, making memories and leaving legacies. If you'd like to find out more about the charity, you can visit our website, which is swansongproject.co.uk. The podcast features songwriters. Every episode I have a different songwriter on. I ask them to share with us one of their songs and talk about how they wrote it. I ask them to share a songwriting tip, and I also ask them to share a song that's meaningful to them in some way related to bereavement. This episode features Megan Henwood. It's a really interesting conversation with lots of different interesting angles of her process, and Megan also runs something called Silver Songs, where she helps other people with their songwriting, so we touch on that a little bit as well. It's a really interesting episode. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you do, please like, share and subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots more great guests coming up that you're not going to want to miss. But without further ado, here is Megan Henwood on the Swan Song Podcast. Enjoy. Okay, today I'm here with Megan Henwood. Thanks for joining me, Megan.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to talking to you. So this is the Swan Song Podcast. For anyone new to the show, we do it in 3 sections. Each episode I have a different songwriter on, and I ask them to share one of their songs. We talk about how they wrote it. Then I'll ask Megan for a songwriting tip in section 2. And in section 3, we're going to talk about a song that's meaningful to Megan in some way related to bereavement. So over to you, Megan. Which song of yours have you chosen to talk to us about today?
I have chosen a song called Painkiller from an album that I released called Head, Heart, Hand. And the title of that album came from this song, and it's called Painkiller.
Brilliant. Well, I'll listen to that now. This is Painkiller by Megan Henwood.
Had a dream in clean, fresh Falmouth blue, solid ground swell, perfect weather. In the middle a miracle came true. The kindest man no longer suffered. And you heal people with your head, your heart, your hands. Painkiller. Underneath the silver mackerel sky, you told me never to say never. And the sweetest of secrets revealed in good time, the blood between the brothers, ironic injustice. Your muscles in agony, but even in weakness, you're still thinking originally. With your head, your heart, your hands. Painkiller. The painkiller. The painkiller. With your head, heart, hands. 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 With your head, your heart, your hands. With your head, heart, people. With your head, heart, hands. With your head, painkiller. With your head, heart, hands. With your head,
Brilliant. So that was Painkiller. Yeah, it's a beautiful song, Megan. A very powerful song. I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about how you wrote it. But when this is on top of my mind, I really like that the album title is not the title of the song, but a lyric from the song. I like it when that happens in things.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of, you feel like as a listener, you might get extra points for noticing things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, great stuff. So yeah, what can you tell us about writing it?
So that song is about my Uncle Louis, who was a physiotherapist, who sort of spent his career really concentrating on pain and kind of how different people experience pain. And I mean, he was a very clever man, and I will not do it kind of full justice in trying to explain his work, but he wrote many books on dealing with pain, and helped a lot of people during his life and career all over the world. And he got unwell, and I was recording the album, and there were just a few lines that were kind of coming to me, sort of without me trying to like conjure anything up. And I started writing little bits, and then I thought, well, I should do it now, because I felt like I'd want him to be part of it, or like be able to hear it basically. And there was a sort of finite amount of time left. But then that was also a pretty daunting prospect in lots of ways. But I did, and I did share it with him, and it meant that we had some pretty incredible conversations, and we're able to say everything that we'd want to say to each other, without any kind of, I don't know, it just felt really like it opened up a beautiful, he was an incredible man. And I think I thought it was just for him, but it ended up going on the album, and then titling the album. And the lyric, the head, heart, hand thing, is actually a link. So Louis was my dad's brother, and my dad is a wooden boat builder. There's so many layers to this, by the way, so stop me if I'm going too deep. But he did an exhibition a few years ago about the head, heart, hand, and the kind of balance of those things, being a crafts person. And I don't know, it just resonated with me as a songwriter. It resonated with Louis as a physio. Just these kind of sort of listening to the kind of the active side of things with your hands, and the more measured side of things with your head, and then the emotional side. I don't know, there's just different ways to interpret it, but it was kind of a family sort of what's the word, approach to things, I guess, maybe a little bit. And so that sort of, I'd always wanted to somehow talk about that in my songs, and that felt like a good home for it. And on another note, all of those backing vocals for the bit at the end were randomly filmed in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford by some people at this amazing night called Catweasel, and I got them all to record it, and they were amazing. It was really great, and we were surrounded by all these crazy like statues and like Greek gods with their no noses but giant appendages. Anyway, and I'm trying to keep this concise, but it is a long story. Then Louis wrote a book in his last few years of his life. He wrote a book that kind of summarized his life's work, and kind of brought it all together. And he ended up putting the lyrics to the song in the book, which then meant that at the time I was gigging a lot all over the place all the time. And so every now and again, I would get someone come up to me after a show and say, oh, I'm a physio, and I heard your music through your uncle's work in the book and stuff, and it became like a running joke that my main fan base was all like comprised of physios. And then a step further was in 2021, my aunt and I went over to Spain because there's a group of physios doing a lot of work around pain there. And there was a big conference, and my aunt was talking there about Louis and doing a talk, and they asked me to come out and sing the song, and there was this huge theater just full of physios singing the song, and it was the most random thing ever. But I think it was a important song for me to write from a kind of selfish point of view, and processing the fact that you know, he was going to be gone like far too soon, and what that meant for the people that he left, and, you know, my cousins and all of that, but and his wife, but it also kind of was the sort of vehicle for me meeting some amazing people that I would never have met before, and that this idea again of balancing the head, heart, and the hand, or the kind of balancing the, you know, different types of creativity, because it's made me realize there's even creativity in medicine, and just that way of thinking. It's, you know, it's all a form of kindness, and it's yeah, so I thought it would be a good song to choose because it kind of took me on a bit of a journey, but I was also able to share it with him before he died. So yeah, that is me. I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll go on and on forever.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing, Megan. It's a lovely story, and it's that yeah, I'm really glad that you got to share it with him. That's something that comes up quite a lot in Swan Song when people have done songs. You know, often it's somebody who's dying themselves has written a song for their family, and I've had so many of these conversations where they've said, I don't know whether to play it for them now when I'm alive, or to leave it for them for after I've gone. And obviously I kind of like don't make that decision for them, but what I've found for the most part is people are really pleased when they have shared it with them, because as you said, it opens that door for conversation. So lots of people say that, and it gives you the person a chance to respond in a way.
Yeah.
And it's just something so magical about a song for opening that door and having those conversations. So I'm really glad that's the way it worked.
Yeah,
well,
I think you know, as a songwriter, I sort of think a lot about you know, external interpretation of what I'm writing about, especially if it's and if you're then writing about someone's actual story, or, you know, someone else's experience that you might not have firsthand experience of yourself. I think you have to realize that it might be changed from your intention by them listening to it, but I think at the core is I've made you something. That's what it is. I love you, and I've made you something, and I cared, you know, I've crafted something because you're important, and to be able to share that is a really important. I mean, I think it also, like you say, it opens doors, because I've lost people in my life where I don't actually feel like I knew them until after they died. I've found things out, or I've kind of, maybe it's getting older and sort of reflecting more, but I think it's but it is scary as well. And you don't, especially if they're dealing with such a kind of vulnerable time and a lot of emotions that I can't imagine. So you don't want to kind of make it more complicated or make it, but at the end of the day, I think it is just, I've made you something. Yeah.
And did you like give him as a recording, or did you play it for him?
I gave it to him as a recording. I don't think I could have played it for him. I think that would have been too much for all involved. And I also then I think it gave him the chance to sort of absorb it in his own time, in his own way. And you know, maybe listen a few times to understand where I was coming from. And like, yeah, I don't think, that would have been too difficult in lots of ways.
Yeah. So back to the writing of it. So do you remember so you said this was when you were recording the album, so you had like the rest of the songs all written?
I think, yeah, we were, I mean, that album did take a very long time, and there was a lot of, it was kind of the album I previously released, which was the first one, was kind of taken out of my hands, and didn't, and I wish that it didn't exist for people to listen to be quite honest. But you know, when like songwriters say you have to write the bad songs to get to the good ones, well, I've got an album of those songs anyway. So yeah, with the second one, I wanted to kind of take my time, and I was working with this amazing producer, Tom Excel, who you might know actually, because he's done quite a lot of work with Kweku and Franz, like, yeah, and like there's someone else that I thought you might know. Anyway, he's a genius and a wonderful human being, and has helped me so much, and it's so much fun working with him. But we took our sweet time. We were so there was a lot of chopping and changing, because I kept writing more stuff, because I was so like inspired by being like in that situation. And also we were recording it in my brother's studio, which he'd only just finished building, so that there was kind of a little bit too much freedom of time with things, which when we did the next one, because we worked together on the last album that I released as well, and we sort of were a bit more disciplined. But yes, there was a lot of chopping and changing, but Painkiller came in quite late in the game, and it was one of those where we knew kind of there wasn't a lot of experimentation. I played it acoustically, we talked about it, and we both kind of were on the same page of what we thought we needed, how to treat it basically. And there also was a kind of, you know, let's get this recorded now in whatever shape or form, because I'd like to share it with Louis. So like someone that gave me a kick up the arse as well. Sorry, am I allowed to say arse?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's like there's kind of pros and cons to both, to like having lots of time. So like, I guess for you, taking your time with that album meant that Painkiller was written and able to feature on the album, which it wouldn't have done if you'd done a more compressed time. And then knowing that you wanted to get the song done to play for Louis was good in that sense, because it meant you got it done.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's like there's never a right or a wrong ways of.
No, it's all about the balance, and I think, like, I don't know if you find this, but I think it is, like, especially with studios, it's about being relaxed enough that you can try things out and experiment and feel safe in that environment, but also focused enough to, like, without being clinical, but focused enough to actually get stuff done. And I think you learn it. Well, I've been trying to learn each time I record, to sort of do things differently and swap things up a bit to be a more efficient person. But efficiency isn't one of my skills, really.
So do you remember so you got the news about Louis and you wanted to write a song for him, and so how conscious, I guess, was the starting point of the song? Had you decided that you wanted to do that, and then was there much like, this is what I wanted to say, or was it just a case of things coming out naturally?
I think it did come kind of naturally, and it ended up being more about about the sort of other like family history stuff as well that came into it. And so it felt like, and so they're all like, my family are from, they live in Cornwall, so they there was, I remember feeling like I want to capture that, because there's something about capturing the sort of place where we're often all together and where we've spent time together, to let everyone else in, like to this, so it's not just a like, it was like more of a song for me and my brother and my dad and like my parents and my cousins, and you know, it was like but again, I think it did just come, it was one of those that I didn't think too much about it. I remember having, there's a line, solid groundswell, which is, I remember texting a friend of mine being like, I want to, what's the word? Well, can you give me some surfing words, please? Or like surfing condition words? Because I kind of knew that I wanted what I wanted to say in terms of, it's a great day for a surf, but I wanted like a more like clever way of saying it. So they sent me loads of things, and apparently solid groundswell, whatever that means. Well, something going on under the surface, I think. But yeah, it came, and then I think I remember there being a conscious moment of, don't try. I think I was, oh, my lamp just fell on me, sorry. I was spending time trying to I was in that thing where I got the verse right, so let's work to the chorus. How's it going to go? Where's it going to go? How are we going to, what's the kind of you know, peak concept point that we're making? And then I kind of realized, no, this doesn't I'm sort of flogging a dead horse here. I've said what I want to say, and actually this isn't the time to be like, you must have a chorus in a song, otherwise it's not viable. Like, this is actually a much more, it's just a bit of writing to music, I guess, a bit more, which sounds very pretentious, but I stopped chasing for the sort of the hook, I guess.
Had you tried some? Had you had like some attempts at choruses, or
I think so,
work,
yeah. And it wasn't working, because I think, you know, it is the sentimentality of it is, whilst that, you know, it is sincere, it's bordering on, I think it's, you don't want to egg that pudding too much, I think. I don't know.
But yeah, it's a good that awareness to have, isn't it, of like when to not stick to a traditional structure, and when to let the song take its own thing, rather than forcing in like, oh, it needs a chorus, so I better force something in here. Yeah, it's a good kind of awareness to have of when the song, and it's such a weird feeling, isn't it, of like, this song doesn't feel right with this.
Yeah, where you think there must be something else, somewhere else for it to go, but it's sort of like a sort of stubborn, like it's sort of digging its heels in, saying, no, I'm here, like yeah, I want to just be a kind of more of a linear thing than an up and downy, like it's more anchored, I guess.
Yeah. Was there any, and I guess this applies to this song, but to your wider work, how intentional are you in general when you sit down to write something? Do you often have an aim for a song, or is it, does things unfold? And I guess I started thinking there about, with this song, if you had any musical intention of how you wanted it to sound. But yeah, I guess both with this song and more widely, when you sit down, do you have a vision of where you want the song to go musically and or lyrically?
Yeah. I think at the time of writing Painkiller, I was in terms of where I wanted that song to go instrumental wise or like atmosphere sound wise, I think it was just sort of capturing that sort of Cornish or like the kind of freshness that I am kind of envisaging when I was writing it. And I think in general at that time I was writing what was coming in a very sort of like super self-indulgent, like, oh, my feelings way, which was amazing. And that's what I'm all about, that like in all the work that I do now, I'm still about that. But I think this is possibly a completely different like conversation, but I think I spent many years writing and performing music that was very cathartic for me to write, but bordered on damaging for me to perform because of the vulnerability that I was putting myself in by being so open and honest. And from I can say that from a kind of place of like what it did to me personally, but also from a songcraft point of view. I think I've learned a lot, or I've steered away from. I mean, I say that I am still, writing songs about my feelings, and it's very, that comes naturally. But nowadays, I'm much more like on the hunt for stories or ideas, concepts that are kind of more challenging for me from a lyrical standpoint, but something that I can connect with emotionally and get that form of catharsis. But also it's not just all about me, because believe it or not, I haven't shown evidence of this so far in this podcast, but I'm not that keen on talking about myself. And so I think, when I think back to that time of writing, it was a very different approach. And in this case, it was, it worked, but there are other things where I would have done things differently now. And I talk a lot about that with the people that I work with now, about how you don't have to kind of wear your heart on. What's the opposite to wearing your heart on your sleeve? Keep your cards close to your chest. There we go. You can still be honest and pour yourself into your music and it be an authentic thing. But if your intention is to perform them and release and all of those kind of things and open it up to interpretation, and especially with social media now, there's all of that. It's really overwhelming. There are subtle little things that you can do to your songs that kind of just create a small barrier between you and the listener and the audience, that's just like protects that like sort of essence of vulnerability that I feel like I basically played rugby with for most of my career. I don't know if that makes sense or not, really.
Yeah. There's the phrase, what's it like? Factually false but emotionally true.
Yeah.
What I really like for songs where the story that you're telling didn't actually happen, but the emotional intention of it and the emotional core of it did happen. Which I think is a great thing with art in general, isn't it? And it kind of, there's always the thing about people saying that you should only write about what you know, which I kind of think is silly, really. If you're a creative person, you can write about things you don't know. And that's part of the fun, is exploring. And I really like songwriters who have a real like specific interest in something that they write about a lot. I don't even know the Hanson family.
No, what, as in not Hanson?
Not Hanson, no. The Hanson family. They're American kind of like Southern Gothic country kind of band. But they've got really kind of weird, quirky songs. Absolutely love them. But they've got an album called Animals, and it's all, so every song's about a different animal. but then they're like stories, so like they can be about anything, but they're all like it's like frogs and snakes,
Yeah,
octopus,
that's
and
amazing.
so things like that, where it's like, oh, somebody's kind of clearly got an interest in this particular thing, but then like uses that as a vehicle for expressing themselves in lots of different ways. And that ability to tell a story about something which might have been completely different to the life you live day to day, but has the same emotional feeling to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I love that kind of the storytelling aspect of it, but it's not always a sort of story, a romance story or like a story of like grief, and like you can still tell a romance story and a story of grief through a story about the invention of a tractor part or something, like. And I did a project there's an amazing songwriter called Finlay Napier, Scottish singer-songwriter, who is a great friend of mine and just an absolutely exquisite songwriter, and weaves like the most beautiful songs out of bizarre, like he's got a song about Justin Bieber going to the fish and chip shop in Glasgow and like falling in love with the woman that handed him his battered sausage and stuff, but it's actually like a super beautiful love song. And we did a project called the Story Song Scientists. So we basically wrote a load of songs about random stories, some of them kind of science-based, got some lab coats and like made a few records and like toured around with it. And that, I think for me, like the talking about the sort of changing in terms of my approach to writing, that was a really big like, okay, I can still connect with these and I can still, get my self-indulgence sort of part from this, but it's really fun and I learned loads of stuff. I mean, I forget most of it quite quickly, but and I think like just having that sort of sense of whose story am I telling? How will I tell it without it being? There's still that pressure, though, isn't there, of telling someone else's story and not wanting to hurt them, especially in a sort of capacity of vulnerability and pain, and they're frightened. You don't want to make things worse, I think. And I think as I've I'm learning more and more about ways to hold a safer space for songs for others as well as my own self, I guess. I don't know if I'm making sense.
So with your practice now, then, do you have any kind of method for? So I'm right in what you're saying there was that you used to be a lot more like all cards on the table, heart on the sleeve songwriting approach, and now you're doing a bit more of that through storytelling and explaining in different ways. Do you have a kind of method of how you do that?
I've got a few, I guess. So a lot of the work I do, I use this method which I call the sock spill, the stream of consciousness sort of spill, and that's kind of when I'm sharing my sort of passion for how you can help yourself. It's not necessarily always about the end goal of the song, and it's more of the process being a powerful, meaningful one. And so I kind of call that, which is, just the classic sort of free writing sock spill thing, but I kind of show different ways that people can adapt it to make it work for themselves. And then I'll do a lot of, so one thing that I have focused on is taking the results of the sock spill and sort of compassionately reviewing it and looking at it with a kindness, because I found that often a lot of stuff that was coming out was quite almost violent, I guess, and I needed to take a bit more control over it. And so that's sort of one way that I would, but that's more of a from a cathartic thing. But then I also talk, sorry, I call them these names, and I talk about it when I work, and I won't let go of them, but it is the most ridiculous thing. So that's the sock spill. And then there's the TOT method, which is train of thought. So you've got an idea, you've got like a starting point, a concept, even if it's just a word or a feeling, and you then spend a dedicated amount of time just splurging out on that theme, and then do the same kind of reviewing thing. But I think a lot of times, so I talk a lot about zooming in or out. So if I've sort of done one of those two methods and I'm getting somewhere but I'm a bit stuck, I might zoom into a thing or zoom out completely and take like a completely different approach, angle to it. So it's not me saying it, it's someone else, or it's in the past, or just swapping it around. But I will then what I often do is then research something, be like completely like an obsessed crazy person, down to sort of the etymology of words, like just so many things to try, and which is overwhelming sometimes because it opens it up even more. But then I can kind of see a clearer route. And the main thing that I've learned is you don't have to say everything in a song. If you're writing a story song, you don't have to say everything. So it's still a kind of work in progress in terms of refining that for me, but I get really excited about these sort of different steps of the process that I am exploring, and sharing that with other people and showing them how fun it can be, basically, how exciting it can be, and how much more meaning you can put in the smallest things, that just feel so exciting. I got a bit overexcited now. I'm sweating.
I completely share your enthusiasm for that part of the songwriting process. I remember I did a song about rust years ago.
Oh wow.
That I remember really enjoying for that reason. It was like, I'm going to learn about rust. I just spent ages Googling all this stuff. I went down a full rabbit hole. And I might use like maybe one phrase from all that research about how rust works. But I find it fascinating. It's a really fun way of doing it.
That and do you do like, would you would you go as deep as like the history of the etymology of like the word rust, or like all the different colors of rust, or I'm just asking you, am I crazy?
No, so I guess for me it was like with that one I knew what my angle was, whereas rust was the metaphor. So I kind of like I knew what kind of elements of rust I was wanting to find out more about, which was going to map onto the story I was trying to tell. So I think I had quite a clear. I'm sure I have some other ones where it's been a bit more open, like on a topic that I was going to write about. But this one, I remember, like I knew I knew the metaphor I was using rust for, so I knew what I needed to know. Well, I knew what things were pertinent and non-pertinent to my.
I see. So you had a
rust.
kind of.
I had some barriers on it, but yeah, I've definitely can't think what the other ones are off the top of my head now. But I've done ones before where it's been like much more of an open book of all the different angles. When you're researching something, and it's so interesting. I find that like your radar, which I think is like a songwriting skill that develops the more you do it. But to where what you choose as being the bits of information, what draws your attention of like, oh, why is something about that? That's a bit what might fit in the song, and that bit might not. But I find that so interesting when you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah, where you're like, what actually draws you in more,
and
might not always be the headline.
And it's basically the same thing as what you were saying about when you've done the stream of consciousness stuff of like, you get all that, you've got all this information, and then the job of the creative then is to like choose which parts of all that. You've got an infinite amount of information really, and they're all loving you, and then like, but this is the particular bit which is gonna work for what I'm doing now, and this is a bit what I'm finding interesting.
Yeah. I just one. Am I allowed to ask you another question?
Yeah, of course.
Real quick. So with the like I haven't really talked about. I think everything that I've talked about in terms of method has been when I'm just trying to get a lyric idea down. But do you find if you have a musical like melody idea, or even if it's just like some chords and a rough sort of like key that you want to be writing in, and then you do a stream of consciousness thing, something I've noticed recently is if that's the case, a lot of what my stream of consciousness give me fits within that very like just and even though I haven't been sort of singing that melody as I'm doing it, and I'm really trying to concentrate on just letting it, and I just find it really interesting how those things are in your brain and then it influences what's coming out in terms of like rhythm and phrasing. And I just wondered if you ever experienced that.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's one of those things I think that, definitely didn't used to have that as much, but I think the more experience you get, I guess that then, even if you just played it a little bit, you kind of know roughly in your head what the tune's like or what the rhythm's like and things like that. And that's one of the things that I find really interesting when you're working with other people who, like might be writing the first song, because they obviously don't have that same interpretation of it as you do. So you might play something you've come up with, and in your head, it's like, well, it's going to go like this. And then they come up with something which is completely different, which can then be really interesting to me. And sometimes I don't find it really hard when I first start doing this kind of work. In your head, you're like, well, no, it should be like this. But trying to resist you writing the whole song and like taking their ideas. But sometimes it's so interesting. Something comes out and you're like, oh, well, I never would have done it like that, but let's try and make it work. And then it can go in a really interesting, different direction.
Yeah, there are so many paths you can take, I think. And that part of songwriting is accepting that this is the path this song has taken. And that and there's so many things where I don't know if you've got a kind of like library of I've taken a certain path with something, which means kind of sacrificing or saying, okay, well, I love all those details, or I love that side of the story, or I love that concept, but it doesn't fit here. So I'll come back to that. I'll put that in the library and I'll come back to that. And maybe one day I will. And but there's always that you can write about the same thing in lots of different ways, and that's okay. And there's that the theory that I really like as well, where that the idea that most artists are trying to say the same thing throughout the whole career, and it's Springsteen did it, and there's this talk where he said he played a bit of "We Got to Get Out of This Place," the Animals song, and he said that's basically every song I've ever written. He's trying to write that song. We've got to get out of this place. There's a better place for us somewhere else. But that theory of you've got this kind of key message you're trying to get across in all these different ways. Interesting. Before we move into section 2, I just want to touch on slightly, so kind of this might make it easy for a listener might not know. Do you want to say a little bit about what you've been doing with Silver Songs? So we're talking a lot about your personal songwriting, but you've been doing some songwriting workshops and co-writing with people who haven't written songs before. So as I said, I used to play and gig and tour a lot, and then 4.5 years ago I had a bit of I had a surprise baby. I don't know how else to put it. Unplanned. I don't know, but I'm very lucky. Love him. It's all great. But it kind of it was I still can't even talk about it. It was that much of a surprise. But and so it sort of changed the way I think about a lot of things, and which I think was happening anyway. I don't want but I've always been such an advocate for songwriting being such a cathartic thing, and I really struggle with trying to articulate exactly how passionate I am about it without me feeling like I'm being just super pretentious. But I personally, from what I have experienced and the work that I've done over the years with other people, and I've been really lucky to work with some great people and talking to them about the process. And for me, I think that there's this sweet spot of the balance between craft and catharsis. That's the pretentious bit, but we all love a bit of alliteration as well. So writing good songs, albeit subjective, it's still a craft, and there's like a whole world of possibilities and approaches there. But then making it, the catharsis part of it, I think, is about the connection and feeling like it's coming from an authentic place. And I was talking about earlier, when I feel like I was coming way too much from one side and bearing my soul in a vulnerable way without actually thinking about what that meant when I shared it, and so the balance of that and sharing that with people and seeing how powerful it can be, for just as an outlet of emotions. And I've worked with people that have never written songs before and just needed to write one song to help them overcome their, some of it, not, I'm not saying that it's a completely overcome. I mean, it's helped them be way more compassionate towards themselves around their demons and their difficulties and things that they've experienced. And then I've worked with people that have sort of brought songwriting in as a practice, like people might do yoga, or it's just a kind of way to sort of be kind to their mind, as a part of their life and their routine. And I was like, okay, I need to sort of separate this. I've got all these feelings about thoughts and ideas about how we can get the most from our songwriting and build our confidence and write better songs, but make us feel better too. So I started Silver Songs last year, and it's still very much in its early stages, and I do one-to-ones and group workshops, and I'm kind of looking into ways of making the workshops available to the people that would benefit most from them. And I'm kind of trying to work out what all the different possibilities and which one to follow, talking about paths and choosing one. I'm in that kind of realm at the moment, but it's just something that I feel really passionate about, and I'm excited to see where it will lead, I guess. And I came across the Swan Song Project through kind of researching when I was, well, that's another story. And I was just so moved by it, and I just thought, there's so many fantastic charities and organizations doing really valuable work, and putting the power and the strength of songwriting or music making at the forefront of what they do, and that's their initiative. But I think there was something so tender in what the Swan Song Project does, and so it's the word, I said this to you before, the word legacy that you use, to be able to actually give a song or receive a song when you're kind of in the most difficult time is really what it's all about. I know you often hear songwriters saying, well, I wrote this song and one person once told me that it meant something to them and that made it all make sense, which, you know, that has happened to me, and it is amazing. Yeah. And I don't want to sort of, but I think that is the point, that it is about it being something that can make it all a bit easier, I guess. And so, yeah, that's Silver Songs in a nutshell, but not in a nutshell, in like some kind of like smashed pistachio salad. I don't know what, that didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that's great, Megan. Thanks for your kind words about Swan Song, and yeah, great work with the Silver Song stuff. I'll put the link in the description as well, so if anybody wants to get in touch and find out more about that,
Thank you.
They can do.
Hi, my name is Deb, and my husband Rich was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia at the age of 50. We were invited to write with the Swan Song Project about memories Rich has, and he wanted to include things in everyday life that mean a lot to him. We met Ben a few times to chat with what he wanted to put in the song and the type of music he wanted to put the words to. Music is a massive part of Richard's life. We were also invited to the recording studios, which he absolutely loved. The song is amazing. Everybody loves it. It's just Rich. And it means so much to us because due to his diagnosis, he will lose his voice eventually, but we will always have it. Please donate to the Swan Song Project to help more people like ourselves and write a song to keep forever. But I'm a happy man. Love my life and do the best I can.
Let's move into section 2, shall we? This is where I ask my guests for a songwriting tip. So what would your tip be for us today, Megan?
Oh, I didn't prepare for this one. Well, I guess I might have sort of touched on it already with, for me, just doing the, you know, if I'm referring to it as the sock spill, but I'm talking about just dedicating some time with a blank page to write and not interrupt yourself with your own, you know, let your own thoughts just go. And I've been doing some research recently about the sort of where the kind of term stream of consciousness or free writing, where those exercises were developed and stuff. And there's a lot of parameters around it. Like the person that sort of coined the free writing as an exercise was a guy called Peter Elbow. You can't ever say his name without putting your elbow up. But it was in the 70s, and he was absolutely adamant that you had to never stop writing. It was almost like this sort of challenge where you had to write in sentences, you had to write in paragraphs, you had to, like, if you weren't able to come up with anything, you wrote this phrase that you'd already like agreed that's, you know, if I can't write, I'm going to write like Willie over and over again or whatever. Don't know why that came to me. Whilst it's amazing, you know, they were experimenting with these great ideas, I think you need enough parameters that will allow you to focus and do it, but you also need to be kind to yourself and open it up. So just do that. That's my main tip. Let it all come out in a way that works for you. So experiment about environment, you know, even down to like what pen you're using or like what time of day you're doing it, all of those kind of things. And the most important tip for me is when you're looking back at it, obviously you're going to look and you're going to think, okay, what's interesting here, or what's lyrical, what's a concept, what's an idea to turn into a song if you're coming at it from a songwriting point of view. But whatever way you're coming at it, be kind to yourself and know that you've in front of you essentially got your thoughts, your running thoughts on a page. And not all of our thoughts come from us. They might float through. And I've worked with people where they've said really, and myself, there are things on there that are unkind to yourself. And I think the empowerment that you can get by saying, I'm going to cross that off now. I'm going to cross that out on this page and actually tell myself now in this moment that I don't feel that, and that came out, but it doesn't necessarily mean I stand by it. And that sort of agency over, well, it's just about kind of starting from a compassionate place and refining right at those early stages in a way that is true. And I know that sounds a bit nebulous, but I think if you're starting from that place, you can take it anywhere and that will still remain. Plus, I just think it's good for your mental health to be kind to yourself in those things. And the more you do it, the more interesting it can be, and the easier it is to get into the headspace to allow you to really let it go. So yeah, and I should take my own advice, because really I should be, doing this every single day. And but I've always, it's never a waste of time, even if the page is covered in absolute nonsense. It's never a waste of time.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And I think like you say, regardless of if you've got an outcome or not, regardless of I'm aiming to write a song here, it's just a good practice to do, because it's good for your mental health. And once, I think one of the things, once you get into the habit of doing it, it does become really fun. It can be very daunting at first. A blank page can be scary, but once you get used to doing it, and I realized there's a few things that you said there that felt like it could become almost like a checklist for the way you do it, of having I'm going to just start writing. If I get stuck, I'm going to write about what type of pen I'm using. I'm going to write about what the temperature is in the room. I used to do this in the morning, and I've got notebooks full of things about coffee. So that'd be my thing, where if I'd get stuck, I'd be writing about my coffee. So you could have a list of, if I get stuck, I'm going to write about these things. And then having a list for the review things, almost, where it's permission to cross out and scribble out anything you really don't like or you feel uncomfortable with, which I always think the idea of throwing things away is something really liberating about that. But it's just the same, I guess, would be to really scribble something out, so you remove that fear of anybody seeing it and judging you in any kind of way. And then I guess you can have a step-by-step guide of how you go through it, what the process of review is, circling themes that might be interesting to explore more, or that kind of thing.
And I think just if it's not something that you've done that much before, then experiment a little bit. And that will, in terms, one thing that I found recently is, which might have something to do with having a 4-year-old kid, but I used to sort of set a 15-minute timer, and that I'd sort of worked up to that being an amount of time where I find it quite hard to focus on one thing for a long time, but that was the sweet spot for me. But that now feels like a little bit overwhelming, and actually I find just 5 to 8 minutes, another little thing that I was told recently is the run up. So often where you get stuck is right at the beginning. You're like, oh shit, what do I write about? Oh god. So do a run up, and that might just be writing run up over and over and over.
Good idea.
And inevitably something will come, which is part of what Peter Elbow said. If you get stuck, write the same phrase. But it's always then. So it's almost, I find myself often doing it from this offset anyway, and because it's sort of, I don't know, it gets you into a rhythm without the pressure of what's coming out, and you sort of fall into it more easily.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Really good stuff. Yeah, thanks, Megan. Let's move into section 3 now, shall we? This is what I ask my guests for a song that's meaningful to them in some way relating to bereavement. And what I'm going to do here is I'll put the link to the song in the description of the episode. So if you're listening to this, you're not familiar with the song, you can pause us here, go listen to it, and then come back. Which song have you chosen for us to talk about here, Megan?
I had chosen a song called Out of Pawn, Pawn, by Anais Mitchell, who is amazing. I have loved her work since I was about 15. And it sort of links back to the song of mine that I chose at the beginning, because the first line of the song, so I went to see her, I've seen her loads, and I there's no other artist that makes me cry like she does. It's honestly, it's a bit like I need a bit of a good cry, and I need a bit of an outpouring of my emotions. Like, when's Anais Mitchell coming to the UK to do a gig? Like, I need it now. It's like a therapy almost. And she came to Oxford, and I hadn't long found out about my Uncle Louis, and you know, how there wasn't anything more that could be done for him. And the first line of this song is, "Hey Uncle Louis, I wrote you a song." And I mean, the song's about the sort of love between this couple in the sort of run up and wake of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And it's like, but there are so many bits in it that feel, it was spooky, but I was looking for the spook, you know, and I needed it, because I needed and I love, you know, that, I mean, that is a pretty, "Hey Uncle Louis, I wrote you a song" was pretty on the nose, but there were lots of other lines that
was the first time you'd heard it, was when you were writing the song, the oracle.
When she when she played it, sorry,
was the first time you heard this song when you'd just written your song for
I hadn't written Painkiller by that point. It was earlier, yeah. So I was like, okay, Anais has told me I've got to. But you know, there's a lot about, there's a line, "When I die, don't cry for me," and it was just too much. I mean, it was to the point where my partner at the time, who was with me at the gig, was like, "You're going to have to leave. You're like, you can't, you can't stay in this room in this state." And I was like, "Well, I know I am going to." And I've been the same ever. Like, she's just amazing, and everything she's done with Hades Town, the like show that she's now on Broadway, is she's amazing. If you don't know her work, then I would urge everyone to. She's an incredible songwriter. But yeah, it's just it's a beautiful song, and I just thought it linked quite nicely to back to me.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's a beautiful song, and some of the descriptions in it are incredible. And that the title lyric, what is it? I'm glad you got your heart out of pawn.
Yeah.
And got your king out of check. It's just such great lyrics. And yeah, like the detail in the description, it's so kind of vivid, and it paints such a real picture of the people involved.
Yeah, it just feels very like, and there's a freshness to it as well, of kind of young love, with this sort of idea that it could end at any time. But in a sort of, as frightening as that is, it's kind of, she's framed it reassuringly, in a way. Or that's how I interpret it anyway.
Yeah, and it felt to me like it's kind of, you know, even if there was an end in sight, I'm very glad that you had this happy time that's describing it.
Yeah.
That kind of appreciation of something like that. Is what that's the kind of feeling I got from it, was that even if it's going to end soon, this is great that this happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I love it. I love all her stuff, but that one will always be a special one for me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song, and she's someone who I've known the name for a long time, but I've never listened to a lot of her work. But I'm very much looking forward to listening to more of it now, because that song is amazing. So thank you for sharing it.
Glad you like it. No worries. Yeah. Thanks for liking it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that brings us to a close. But thank you very much, Megan, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for everything that you do. Like, I don't want to sound disingenuous, but it's extremely profound what you give to people and what you do, and big admiration.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. So thank you very much, and thanks for listening, everybody. I'll put all your links in the description, Megan, so people can check out you had an EP out this year, is that right?
No.
No. Okay.
I've sort of had a smattering of singles for over the last few years, but there'll be more at some point. Sure. I did some covers. I did some bloody covers. So I did have an EP out. I just forgot about it. Sorry. It wasn't about me. No.
But I'll put all the links anyway, so everyone can check out your stuff, and look forward to hearing more new stuff in the future, and the Silver Song stuff as well.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure, Megan. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll be back with another episode soon.